Are you curious about new bugs since this past week's game update? Hello, my name is Jennifer and welcome to my Sims 4 news video. So I'm going to go over at a high level what was in the game update, the new features, what was fixed, also the mod impact, but of course those new bugs. I'm going to talk about the new bugs mostly at the end because we kind of need to see what's new because some of it feeds into some of those new bugs. And so we're going to start with the patch notes, which you can see in front of you there. And it shows you the update numbers depending on what platform you're on. And if you want to look and confirm, you can see that on the bottom right-hand corner of your main menu. It shows there. One fun thing in the patch notes this time is we had a little video which showed much of what was new in the base game update. It missed a few things, but of course one of the main things is we can create a ghost and create a sim, and you can pick the various causes of death, and that would expand depending on your packs. You can also do it for children and older, and there's a toggle there so you can see the sim in more detail. There's an issue with console for that. And now we can also pick the occult in Create a Sim when you create them. You can still create them the same way, but you can also convert them there. And they change it so Sims will react differently depending on how well they knew the Sim that died. And also we now have the option to become a playable ghost versus a free roaming ghost versus that, game over that we used to have. And you can select between an urn and a gravestone, inside or outside, it doesn't matter. And we can woohoo with Grim. You can have babies with them, but you can woohoo him with them. And there's a new life event category, outdoors, in the events there. And then you can turn elder pets and horses into ghosts. Which a few of those things lead to some of the bug reports, which is why I said we were going to start with that. So this we already saw about the fact that you're going to react differently depending on how you know the sim. They did some fun things where, ghost sims have a new set of needs in place of the classic living sims. You can see that there, though that is a spellcaster ghost sim that I happen to have. If you have a regular sim, it'll just look the same, except for it'll have the same names of the categories. Now, one thing I had sort of touched on briefly, that toggle overlay to switch between the ghost form and the non-ghost form so that you can see better what you're doing when you're editing them, that isn't there currently, at least on console. So there is not a bug report, there's just a report in the console section. And so for PlayStation, you have to hit R3 from what this is saying here. I'll be linking to everything on a blog post, so all of the links, which there's a lot because there's a lot of bugs, will be there and you can see it at that point. And then for Xbox, you have to click A on the sim first and then click on the right hand stick. And if you don't click the A first, it randomizes Sim's appearance, and they have some more details there. So if you play on either, go head over and check that out so that you can see how to toggle, because you don't have that little icon there from what this report seems to be saying. Now, here's something that wasn't mentioned in the video. Upon the death of a marriage partner, two married Sims will no longer be married. They'll be widowed. However, there is a new interaction that will allow them to ask to stay married so they can reinstate their marriage status. And then there was some improved autonomous ghost behavior, such as reducing the frequency of ghosts breaking things and creating annoying ghost byproducts, i.e. puddles. And the other two things were mentioned in the video, and you can see the section there a little bit more clearly with respect to that new outdoor picture category and build mode. Now, one thing they didn't mention there is that infant, toddler, and child sims taken by social workers, or i.e. whisked away, will go to the household menu and manage worlds rather than being deleted. Now, there is a bug report with how that is happening, but they're not playable in some cases, but we'll go over that when we get to the bug report. And they added a new bonfire object called the Fieldstone Bonfire Pit to base game. Keep in mind that everything new is not going to have a new symbol. That's just how it works. So it's good to know what it is. We know they shared about the gravestone urns, but they added 10 new true black color variants to 10 different base game shoes, and they name them there and they show the screenshot of them. So that's always kind of a good thing to have. You can pick whatever gravestone or urn you want depending on how many packs you have. They don't have to match what the sim is. which they did kind of go over in the video, but they all are. And then we have the Merfolk Urn and Tombstone for players with Island Living. And then we have the thing where players can swap occults while in Create a Sim if they have the packs, of course. And it doesn't remove progress on a sim that's currently being created within reason. And I think that's because if you've created a sim and they have like, you know, their second figure, like the vampire form or the mermaid form and so on, I would think that would be within the reason that that might not have, you know, stay the same way. But I'm just speculating on that. And I was like, why would I want this? But I realized that sometimes I take sims from the gallery and they're just regular sims and I want to change them into, in my case, usually a spellcaster, but whatever. You can do that very easily. Though you still have the ability when you're creating sims to pull up the pop-up to choose the occult there too. This is just if you take an existing sim or you realize partway through that you want to change it. You can use the CAS full edit mode sheet to change sims that are already in the world to a new occult or non-occult, but sometimes when you use that sheet, you can have issues. I know there's issues with traits, so I wouldn't be surprised if the same could be true with this. And of course, if you're doing it with cheats, they don't necessarily support that. And of course, we can have elder, dog, cat, and horse ghosts and create a sim that can be created if you have those packs. Now that has also led to a bug report. There are some bugs with existing ghosts not meeting the new requirements, and so they're no longer the ghosts. We'll get to that as we get to that later on. Now, one thing that they did do, which was kind of new, I guess, is they've been working on DirectX 11 for Windows. And what they did was they did improved GPU detection on hybrid systems, which is generally hybrid GPU laptops. So if a laptop has a standalone GPU and they always have an integrated GPU, it wouldn't by default recognize that standalone GPU. And so it would still be on DX9. And now it should be converting it to DX11. Now, that said, if you were happily playing along on DX9 and playing in full screen mode, you cannot Alt-Tab out when you are in full screen mode. The option is to go into windowed full screen, which still looks like the full screen, but it's windowed, so you can then Alt-Tab out or use window. Or if you just don't want to, you can go and switch back to DX9. If you're having problems loading the game, sometimes going to DirectX 9 can help with that. I saw a few people say when they switched it back. So you can do it there. If you can't even load your game, you can do that in the EA app under Manage Properties. And in there, you go -DX9 if you can't open your game. You could possibly have issues with some mods. Most have been updated to DirectX 11, but there might be a few that haven't. But the major mods, I use UITeats and MCCC, and they work fine because I've been using DX11 even before it, became, I had to opt in, I was using it. But anyway, so we have the bug reports here, that were the bug fixes, I should say. And everything here, of all the bug fixes, ties to what was on the laundry list, but 2 weren't fixed. The Sims will fully close their eyes when they're supposed to be, like when they're sleeping. That bug report was closed, but there's a new bug report. So it wasn't fixed, but a new one was created. The NPC Sims no longer entering the lot without knocking the door, which is also like Sims invading the house, is what I think the bug report is called. That bug report just stayed open. It didn't even get closed. It's still there, and there was a whole bunch of different reasons that could happen. So that bug report that it was linked to is still open. All the rest, which you can see here, they are all marked as fixed, and from what I can gather, the things I had noticed in the past, they do seem to be working and fine. Like my checked the library that wasn't in Willow Creek, and they had actually more books, more skill books than the ones at Willow Creek used to have. The Willow Creek has all the books because they've just obviously changed something to do with, I'm thinking, the fact that it's a library. But the bookshelf that was at Willow Creek, if you have, like I have a room with that bookshelf and I placed it somewhere else that's not a library, and it still had those basic skill books. So it still works, but it's better because you'll get like newer skill books that weren't there with that bookshelf and how it worked before. But just in general, the things that I saw seem to be fixed, and they're all marked as fixed. And they're all done by, you have EP, then Game Pack, then Stuff Pack, and then you have the last one is from a kit. Whereas the laundry list, if you're trying to compare it, it's just alphabetical. So I had to tick it off just to see that everything was on there. But it is, other than those two things didn't get fixed. So one thing that got fixed that wasn't actually noted in the patch notes was that off the grid lot challenge was keeping you from loading the game in lib mode. You could go in build mode and remove the lot challenge, but that's actually been fixed. So there was a mod fix for it, so you shouldn't need that anymore because it's actually, as you can see, fixed and closed. So that's a nice, pleasant surprise that something got fixed that wasn't even on there. One thing I didn't notice was anything about any of the Reaper reward event, anything there being fixed, because there's nothing in the patch notes, and I didn't see anything where they were closed. So I'm not going to go over those, but I didn't see anything, and they said they were going to be doing some fixes for it, but I didn't see anything fixed for that. So if you're a computer player and you're having problems still, mods broke. A lot of mods broke. So we're going to talk about that a little bit very briefly. You need to probably test with your mods folder out and repair your game, and then do a 50-50 after you've checked the status on your mods in CC. CC didn't seem to break, but mods definitely did break. And so that's just there. I'm not going to go over in detail. It was just sort of a high level, there you go. So as I said, most mods broke, though many at this point have been updated, and some good sources of information are Scarlett's mod tracking list, which will track safe for work and not safe for work, so you can get everything there, or Loose mod tracking list, which is on EA Answer headquarters, and it only does, things that don't raise the game's rating. And that tends to be what I use, but it really depends on how you like to look at it, which one would work best for you. And then also we have various discords, such as Deadpool's Discord, where it just sort of pops up as things are updated, whereas the list will be a point in time. So you can, if you're looking now, you can see what was updated or what is broken at a point, versus the discords just, generally come up as it happens. So in the beginning, I prefer to see what's happening, but later on, as time has passed, like now, I prefer to use the lists. And in my case, loose lists is my preference, but it depends on how you like to look at things, which one is better. So speaking of loose lists, here it is at the time that I'm recording this. And you can see the newly broken obsolete game mods. So that's still a pretty long list, given that we're, a few days past the patch notes or the game update. So the bolded ones are the ones that are commonly used. So Twisted Mexi's Better Build By and Tool Mod are common ones, but you can see there's a couple other ones by Twisted Mexi. Many injection tools that are used by other, that you need to use, and other modders use them to make their mods work, they broke. But the two main ones, they have been updated, which we'll get to. But you can see that Brain Blasted Injection Tool is noted there. Those are, at the time I'm recording this, either broken or you have some that are obsolete because they shouldn't need it based on the patch notes, or they're not supported anymore by the modder. But one thing to note here is that custom loading screens that don't use a custom plumb bob, there's flickering but no loading problem. There is an issue with them. And that seems to be because Maxi's modified the loading screen file, which almost never happens. Just to add, they're saying ads for different DLCs during the loading screen, but when they looked a bit closer, it just turned out like they're pictures. So you can see there with still the tips underneath it, but this is preliminary, it's not final. So we don't know whether that's just a placeholder and is going to add DLC names to it or not, but it is also similar to what they used to do in still do in Sims 3 when you have loading screens, which of course for Sims 3 you have loading screens because you're opening the game and it takes a long time to open the game, or if you're going to travel to another world, you have if you're going on vacation, then you have a loading screen, or you're going to university or something like that. There's times in Sims 3 where there are loading screens, and then they do have DLC where you play a little game. So I'm not saying this is not a game. This is just similar. It reminds me of the fact that you do have that in Sims 3. And now we have updated game mods, which is so long that I actually got like some video clips of it because it was going to take me too long. And I really do recommend you go check out either Loose List or, like I said, Scarlett's List. And you can see here, and she usually puts like the date of when they were updated so you can know. And some things got updated more than once. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Not everything, like MCCC didn't get updated more than once. It was okay. But so it's here, but then some of the ones here that are like more popular are also in a different spot. But as you can see, the list is quite long of what's been updated. So you need to make sure that you have, if you use those mods, that you have the updated version of the mod in your game. Otherwise, you will have problems. And a lot of people were having big problems. And you can see the more columns and UI cheats were updated there. And there's just overlap just because of the way I didn't want to scroll down to seeing the next part of it, which is here, the newly broken, obsolete CC and build by game mods. So, but as you can see in this case, there wasn't really that much for this particular category. It's like all there on the screen. And then you have cleared by the creator for the patch, which is still pretty long because there's a lot of mods for Sims 4, so that's why. But you have to make sure that your Lot 51 and your core injector, you have it, because it does impact some of these mods. And if you don't have the updated version, then those mods won't work. So keep in mind, Wonderful Whims did get cleared. It was cleared kind of late, but it's been cleared as working. So, but compared to what broke or what's been updated, it's very short. And now here's just, she always has a summary of the core injector testing and protection mods. So those are the current versions. So if you use those, you should have those versions in your game. And then there are some recent creator news. And then she does also have, what was broken from like the last update, which I'm not including here, but I would suggest go checking that out because it doesn't show here. If it was already broken, it doesn't come on here. This is newly broken. So now we have the new bugs since the update. We also have the couple that were in the patch notes but weren't fixed. And then we have some common bugs that have been since July and the September updates, just because I know I see a lot of people talking about that. And we're going to start with the new ones since the October 22nd update. So Krinrick did a tweet which had a list of some, and I do cover all of those here, but there are a few more that weren't here because this was from the 23rd and I've been monitoring the bug reports since then. And so I have more things than what was showing there. So first off, we have 3 that pertain to ghosts. So one is that Captain Whitaker is no longer a ghost. So Captain Whitaker is an adult dog that is part of the lore that comes with cats and dogs. And he is a ghost. But since they've made it that only elder pets, cats, dogs, and horses can be ghosts, he's no longer a ghost in a game that's been updated on the 22nd. So that is one of the bug reports. Another bug report is with respect to Wishing Well ghost children that were turned back to human. They're not ghost children anymore. And that's because the Wishing Well sometimes uses deaths that aren't fire or drowning. And so the game won't recognize them as being ghosts and they turn back into regular Sims. So you can see obviously the one picture is from before the update and the other one is, well, now she's no longer a ghost after the update. And similarly, there are actually some death types missing for children because they can actually die from more than just fire and drowning. They can't die from as much, like they can't starve to death, but they can freeze to death and they can like burn to death with heat and they can die from the pufferfish poisoning. So the thing with when I was looking through the bug report for the ghost children from the Wishing Well is they would assign them death traits because you got a death trait that weren't things that kids could ever get, but they still had them. And interestingly, when I looked at the death types when you're creating a ghost from like say a teen, they do have some death types that teens can't actually die from, like the emotional deaths. Teens can't die from those without a mod, but they're available for you to choose them to have those death types when you're choosing what their cause of death was if you're creating a ghost in Create a Sim. So now we're done with the issues related to ghosts, and we're going to talk about the other new issues since the game update. So this first one is you can't transfer Sims to a new household in Manage Worlds. So if you go to like the map view and use Manage Worlds, and you have a household and you try and move them into a new household, you can see there it says that transferring is not allowed. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that it's a sim and a horse. You can create the new household, but you can't move anybody into it. You can move sims into an existing household, you just can't move them into a new household. So the workaround was suggested just to go into live mode to do it. So if you do that, it'll just automatically take the sim that's initiating it, which obviously has to be a teen or older, but you can't transfer anyone else in. So it only lets you do it with the one sim. And so essentially the workaround is, if you want more than one sim to go into the new household, is to go into the household, have the one of the sims move out into the new household, and then go to map and move the other sims into that new household. That's essentially what you need to do. But it did have quite a few people already having added a Me Too to it. And there are already issues with transferring sims from the household already into existing households. But this is a different issue, that you can't create a new household from Managed Worlds, and even in the game, you can only create the new household of one sim. So the other thing is, occult eyes features disappear when entering live mode. So you can see the sim in the creative sim has the occult eyes, but in live mode, they just have regular eyes. Then you have sims aren't disappearing in the rabbit hole when they're going to work or school. So like, they'll just stand at the edge of the property. You can't control them or anything. They're like they're there, but they just don't physically disappear. The action doesn't proceed when you're trying to woohoo with Grim Reaper. So the workaround that someone was suggesting is get them, maybe close to where you're going to do it, initiate some other interaction so they go over to where you're going to do it, and then you can woohoo. So it's not that you can't woohoo at all. It's just that there seems to be some proximity issue from what I could see from that report. So here's the one I mentioned before. Your whisked away children cannot be played. So if the sims get taken and they go to manage households, they're there, but when you move them back into the household, they're grayed out like they're at school or just away, and you can't do anything really. They're wandering around, but you can't do anything with them, and there's no way to get them to be playable. Someone did a further test, and they said that if they were whisked away because like the parent or whatever in the household died, then they could be playable. It's when they get whisked away due to neglect that there seems to be an issue where they can't be playable. So it's like they're kind of a hidden sim and you can't play with them. Another one, parents need to introduce themselves to their infants. One workaround I would suggest if you do experience this, that I have noticed has helped in the past, is you have the infant smile at the parent, and that will be the introduction. But still a nuisance that it's there. Doesn't have that many Me Too's yet. Objects are stuck when placed in the world after loading a residential rental. There's some issues just in general around objects and overlapping stuff, which there is an existing bug report, which we'll get to afterwards. So essentially, they're saying that they place something out in the world, like a violin or something like that, and then they load it into a residential rental lot and then went back to the original house. And when they were in the house that had originally owned that violin, they can no longer play with it. It's like crossed out and they can't use it. So there just, in general, seems to be some issues, and people are like walking through things that are there. That's that particular bug report. Though there are other similar ones. So Sims are wearing default underwear when they're naked. So there's an example there that when they're showering, they just should be, they're still, both cases, pixelated, but you can see in the bottom case that they have black underwear on, the male, and with the females it's like the pink underwear. So you can see it through the pixel that they actually have that underwear on. So you don't see it specifically because it's pixelated, but that's essentially what they're talking about. So now we have the two things that were in the patch notes but weren't actually fixed. So you have the first one where you had an eyelid issue, and they actually did add this to the existing report, but it got moved out to its own new report because this might possibly be a slightly different issue. But this person is a modder and they've done some details, but you can see it does have quite a few Me Too's already on it. It had 71 when I got that screenshot earlier. And then the other one is the Sims invading homes, which is the original bug report you can see from, December 2023. That's still there. And then they have, some other reasons why they might have it, but this particular overview one is still there. So now we're going to talk about some common bugs since the July and September updates. So the first one here has been an issue, as you can see, since the July update, and it is that the sign fishing spots are not working in Sulani. You can still fish from a sailboat, and I know for sure in Waplem that there is a sailboat there that's just there and anyone can use, so you can fish from that, but you can't fish from any of the signs. This next one is also since July, where the action won't queue for resume or frogging knitting. And of course, that's a nifty knitting issue and it's affected a lot of people. There is a mod fix for that. So if you use mods, you can get that and you'll be able to knit and resume your knitting and frog your knitting. This is another one that's been since July, where the school daily tasks are not appearing for all teens. Essentially, if you go to school with more than one teen, only one teen will get the tasks. You can still control the other teens. They just don't get any tasks. I'm not aware of any mods to fix that particular issue. So now we have this one, which is actually not a new bug report, as you can see here. It's like from 2022. However, it's more common since pre-Lovestruck update, so since July. The reports start at page 3 from July, and there are now 13 pages of reports for this particular issue. So essentially, in some cases, this isn't affecting everybody. The teenager won't get their third trait when they're aging up. They also get no graduation. If you have parenthood, they may not get their character values, positive or negative character values. But this doesn't affect everybody, but this is the bug report. So it has affected, you can see, quite a few people, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those are more recent, just given that they are a lot more reports now, pages of reports, than they were previous to July. Now you have this other one, which I had mentioned before. You have the overlapping festivals and food stalls. And this dates back a long time, as you can see here, but it also is way more common since the September 18th game update. They were at page 7 of reports, and now when I got this screenshot, they're at page 24. So it's very common now, but I think there's a little bit of muddling about, those items in the world that seems to be more common since this most recent update, even, that they were talking about the impact of the residential rentals. This seems to also be happening here, where there are objects and you got the little red cross thing and you can't interact with them for some people in the thread since the October update. And so then the other thing, this is from the September update, that you can't request a table in a restaurant if you have dine out on a date, or if you have Lovestruck on a hangout. You can't do that. So I don't know if there's any mod fixes for that. I'm not really sure. I didn't notice any, but there could be. Could be for any of the ones that I haven't mentioned that I just haven't happened to have seen them. So those are all sort of the older bug reports, but the more recent bug reports, i.e. since July/September, as opposed to there are some other bug reports. So here's the popular now and the current issues that I just want to show, but some of the ones we talked about are actually showing there. And of course you do have the issue with the Reaper's Reward where the planting flowers are not checking off for people, but I've covered some of that stuff in other videos. So this just is something that you can see in case you're recognizing some issues you maybe are having in your game are showing there. And as I said before, I have a blog post that will have links to everything that I've shared here. So you'll be able to go, including those bug fix mods that I mentioned, they're all there too. So you can go check that out if you want to see the source of any of this. Anyways, did you update your game, and did you have any problems? Were you excited to see the new things? And have you experienced any of these bugs, the new or the kind of older ones? I'd love to know in a comment down below. But that's going to be it for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!